I'm doing a great work and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop so I can come down to you? These are the words of Nehemiah as he built the walls fortifying Jerusalem over 2,000 years ago, as told in the book of Nehemiah in the Bible. Today we see, just as it was back then, that Jerusalem is the source of heavy conflict in the Middle East, with multiple groups of people vying for control over the ancient city, and global powers weighing in on the conflicts that have been brewing over centuries. Join us as we delve into the mystifying history of Jerusalem and Israel, exploring the ongoing struggles and complexities that have shaped this ancient area for over 2,000 years. Through riveting discussions, we unravel the mysteries surrounding Israel's pivotal role in global affairs, its significance in the Abrahamic faiths, and the intricate web of U.S. foreign policy in the broader Middle East. Get ready to expand your understanding of one of the most misunderstood regions on Earth, here on the Great Work Podcast. All right, welcome, Charlie. So guys, I know Charlie. I've known you for a long time, probably 2016, right?
I think so. Yeah, 2016.
So Charlie is a friend of mine. He was the chair of Michigan College Republicans while I was chair of Minnesota College Republicans. We were a part of an organization called the College Republican National Committee, or CRNC, where all of the state chairs would get together. It's a little unfortunate that that's kind of defunct now. It doesn't really exist anymore. A couple years after we got out, I don't know what happened. Someone just kind of nuked the organization. I don't really know. But Charlie is now a political consultant. He goes on news programs talking about Republican and Democrat politics, and he has political clients who he advises on a key range of issues throughout their campaigns. Charlie, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, number one, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's a real honor. I remember we met back when people thought Donald Trump was crazy and he had no chance of winning. But I think as conservatives, we were always big Trump people. I mean, obviously, I like the drama, I like the flair. I think that sells well on TV. And obviously did. I mean, he took that election by storm. I think he was his own worst enemy. And I truly believe that to this day. If he could get out of his own way, he'd probably be perceived as a much more likable candidate that people can get behind. But yeah, so my professional background, I've been an activist. I've been in party leadership. I've been a staffer on campaigns, and now I'm a political consultant and strategist. So essentially what I do is I either work with groups or individuals, and I help them navigate the political process, whether that be a campaign, something to deal with public affairs, getting their issues to the forefront of politics. And I mean, it is so nuanced when you're dealing with any political issue that it does take, I believe, someone who can focus on coming up with a strategic plan and actually be able to execute it. And that's what I do. And I absolutely love it.
So if somebody wanted to work with you, if someone was looking to run for office, can you talk about the levels of office you usually help and things like that, and how to contact you?
Yeah, definitely. So the best way to contact me is my website, my phone number's on there, my email address. If you're on Instagram and you want to keep up with me, at Charlie Kolean, I always check my direct messages as well. So there's two good ways there. And as far as helping people run for office, I mean, what my team and myself do is we'll work with people running for almost any position, but we really want to work with people who are serious about winning. And what this means is they have the time and resources to dedicate to the actual election process. Because I think a lot of people, and I think a lot of people do want to run for office. They want to have their voice be heard, but they're very naive about getting into the process. And that's totally fine. I mean, I don't think our country was built on supposed to having career politicians or anything like that. But I do think for anyone watching who's interested in potentially running for office, it's really important that I think you have at least 2 to 6 hours a day to dedicate to your election. You're not afraid to pick up the phone and call people and have uncomfortable conversations. Being able to finance your campaign is a huge part. You've got to be able to fundraise, or at least try and attempt to. And then I think back in the day, and the smaller the office, the more the strategy works, where you're just the nice guy that everyone knows in your hometown, and you're running for dog catcher or city council or village president or something like that. But like the bigger the office and the more contested it is, like you really got to be able to willing to take policy stances that could be controversial, because just like what we were talking about with Donald Trump, like the flair, the bomb throwing, that gets attention, and it doesn't always win. But I mean, you do need to be willing to go down that path sometimes.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm going to have all your stuff linked below if people want to follow you for just your commentary, or if people want to work with you. I'm going to have that all linked.
Thank
So
you.
people check that out in the description. But I want to talk to you about a couple things. So being a political strategist, you oftentimes post your like thoughts on what's going on in the race. And a couple days ago, you were talking about the Israel-Palestine conflict, which is most of what my audience is focused on these days. Can you talk a little bit about like kind of the overall landscape of this issue right now? And I think your stories were talking about the Democrat Party. So let's go there first.
Yeah. So I mean, Jewish Americans, for the most part, are Democrat voters. They are donors. I would say like Muslim Americans, it's they are not affiliated with a party yet, and like many people, I would say in the industry would not categorize them in one camp or the other. So what we're looking at is two camps of people who one is a voting base for one party, one's unclaimed, and both I think, and from my conversations with people in both communities, are very upset with Joe Biden's handling of the Middle East. And I think if there was a more decisive action coming out of the White House or the US government with what's happening in Israel, I think it truly does take executive level attention, and that would be more press conferences, that would be more photo ops. I mean, I we are doing a lot of stuff for Israel with sending weapons, coordinating with the military, moving an aircraft carrier into the Mediterranean. But realistically, the photo ops and the politics is not matching the equipment that's being moved around. And it's really going to cost the Democrats in the upcoming election. And what we saw, so there was this poll that came out in Michigan, and Michigan's a swing state. I truly believe it's in play for the presidency, especially if Trump's on the ticket. He's 10 points up above Joe Biden. And when you talk about the Middle Eastern community with the two groups that I just listed, they have a heavy concentration in Metro Detroit, in Dearborn, Michigan. We saw the Muslim community come out very heavy in local school board elections in Dearborn and actually flip them because they were sick of like the wokeisms happening in school. And I think anyone who has a stake in the Middle East, who's ever visited it, who's been there, who follows it, the response coming out of the United States is nothing. I mean, it's like, hey, let's sit on our hands. We'll move our military equipment around, but we're not going to have any like moral direction or compass kind of telling the American people what to think and feel, or the world what we're going to do. And I think with that vacuum of leadership, like it really is going to cost the Democrats in this upcoming election.
Okay, that's really interesting because I a lot of my audience is historically Democrats, which is
Yeah.
funny that they follow me. I would say I present myself pretty moderately, and I'm pretty moderate, I guess, now. But it's interesting because many of them have turned on Joe Biden, saying that he's not doing enough. They would not feel safe with the Joe Biden as president because of the not just what's going on in the Middle East, but the anti-Semitism rise here, and how the administration is putting Kamala on the Islamophobia task force, which I don't know if it's an insult or a good thing because she is the most incompetent member of this administration by far.
Well, I mean, Kamala's protecting the border, and now she's in charge of Islamophobia. So I think a lot of stuff's going to get solved very quickly.
So we've got that going on. And then it's kind of weird in every story you read, Joe Biden is backing up Israel to a degree with what you said, with munition sales, with moving the aircraft carrier. But that's always buried in the lead. I mean, I don't think anyone in the administration like Joe Biden has come out yet and said, we are trying to wrap up this war. But then he'll say something like indiscriminate bombing. And it's like, that's not happening. He just doesn't seem to have a story straight, but that's a lot of things. With the Republican Party, is this a pickup opportunity for the Republican Party?
Yeah, I mean, I think so number one, all the candidates I work with, if they're running for US Congress or something to deal with the federal government, the number one thing donors currently want to talk about is foreign affairs and Israel. If someone has any experience in the Middle East, if they've been to the Middle East, what they think about what's going on, if they have some personal connection, that's the number one story that people want to speak about, and that's selling politically. So, I think the appetite is there with donors. Number two, I think it is a pickup opportunity. And the best way I think the Republicans can realistically play this to get voters is to give people a sense of security, what they would do if they were in charge. And I mean, if they could provide stability in the Middle East, if they could provide a good mouthpiece or talking points on what actually is being done and what we're going to do to secure the situation over there. And then finally, if there can be some realistic steps to be taken to having to solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And if that's a two-state solution, I think Republicans need to be able to actually say how they're going to get there.
Awesome. So, two places I want to go there with that. Donors concerned about the Middle East. APAC talked about all the time as this lobbying firm with outsized political influence. You and I have both been affiliated with APAC. Can you talk about, from your clients, how does APAC work with the rest of political donors? Are they the most prized endorsement you can get or something like that? Just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I got involved with APAC when I was a student at Michigan State, and I was a campus activist. I went on their student leader trip to Israel in 2016, shortly before the election. And I think they used to have a big policy conference where they would take all their stakeholders to DC once a year. And I think I attended 2 or 3 of those. So I'm very familiar with APAC. And a lot of the clients that I'm dealing with are either in Republican on Republican races or Republican on Democrat races. Thankfully, for the most part, supporting Israel is a bipartisan issue. So in a Republican on Republican race, I would say it's more playing out in the fundraising aspect of things, where it's if we have someone who has been in the military and has been to the Middle East, do you find the conversation very enjoyable to hear about their experience over there? And I mean, that conversation is played out over and over again on a one-by-one basis when we're speaking to people about helping us with our campaign. I would say in the Republican on Democrat race, it's the Democrats to a certain degree are tied on what they can say their strategy is in the Middle East, because they do have to be team players. They do have to support Joe Biden. But realistically, what can they say? Yeah, we're moving an aircraft carrier into the Middle East. We're doing munition sales. We're really going to try and combat Iran while Yemen is bombing cargo ships in the Red Sea and effectively shut the entire thing down. So I think it's going to play out more this summer. I think it really depends on how the conflict goes and if it does get more media attention. Because sadly, there was a lot of media attention with the initial attack by Hamas. And then I think there was a lot of stuff following up to the invasion of Gaza. But right now, I would say, as far as new news being generated, there's not a ton of other new news currently coming out, and we're right on the verge of the Iowa caucus, and I really think that's going to take up a lot of steam. APAC, though, from what I've been hearing, it's in Democrat on Democrat primaries. This is nothing firsthand that I've ever been involved in, but as far as making sure we have pro-Israel Democrats winning primaries, because there is a movement in the progressive left to side with Palestinians, to side with Hamas, and we're seeing that play out on social media, number one. And then number two, I think you see representatives like Rashid Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, who are actively taking their side. And I just think it's those are going to be the targets for a big national group like APAC. And their biggest challenge, I would say, is not going to be on the fundraising aspect. It's going to be on actually finding quality candidates who can win in those districts, because they're both two very unique areas.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Two unique areas that we're both familiar with.
Yeah, and let's just talk about the areas. So, I mean, Rashid Tlaib, Dearborn, Michigan, huge Muslim population. So how do you find someone who can go into that district and beat her in a community she's consistently won? And she didn't come out of the blue. I mean, she was a community activist before she got elected to Congress. So she's a well-known name brand over there. And it's like, it's going to take more than just money to win the fight. And then I would say like Ilhan Omar. So I'm from Michigan, so that's like kind of how I can speak about that area very well. I'm personally not from Minnesota, but where Ilhan Omar is from, Minnesota, that area is heavily Somali.
Mhm.
And I mean, she's from the community. She's well known. She has a name there. So that's the other thing too, where it's like, even if an outside group comes in and says they're going to shower a bunch of resources on some candidate who's going to challenge them, well, like, time's ticking. It's in Michigan, the primaries in August. So it's like, okay, you have 8.5 months right now to find someone and run a serious campaign. Can you do that? I don't know. I'm very doubtful. Why haven't they done it before? Because they haven't been able to find anyone. And I'd say same thing with Ilhan Omar. Like, this is a woman who openly attacked APAC, who I think said some people did something referring to 9/11,
Yep.
but they can't find anyone to challenge her. And that's where the resources need to be invested, not saying, oh, we've bundled a ton of money and then have said bad candidate go out there and waste it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. The last election, the last primary, Ilhan only won by 1 percentage point because people have said because of the Jewish community, because her congressional district is the most heavily Jewish district in the state of Minnesota, but also the most heavily Somalian district. And she lost by like 1 percentage point. That's because the district shifted and picked up other areas and stuff. But if Republicans had crossed over and voted for the other guy, she would have lost. But we couldn't because we had one loser running for like a general or something. So in the primary. So thank you to him. That's the thorn in the side of Minnesota politics. So for APAC, when we talk about these special interest groups, obviously a big part of your job is fundraising. Just the most basic thing of this is it takes money to run a campaign. And that's not a bad thing. We're a capitalist country. It takes money to run campaigns. There's certain limitations based on how much you can raise from each group. APAC basically can give that set amount of money. I don't know what it is now, because I think it went up with inflation, right? That you can raise per cycle.
Yeah, so the individual donor rate went up. And I mean, I would say how most interest groups will raise money is they'll find a candidate that they like, and then they'll tell their donors who want to be politically active to say, hey, you should max out to this candidate. We vetted them. And then sometimes they'll start like a PAC or a super PAC and say, hey, you can also put money in here. Like, we're managing it. We're going to make sure it's not wasted. And we're going to spend it to get this person across the finish line. So that's kind of how they get involved in elections. And they used to not do anything politically. Mm-hmm. Like they used to not get involved in elections with an outside expenditure or anything, apparently. But I think after the Iran deal passed, and COVID hit, they're like, well, it doesn't make sense to have this big policy conference if we can't have people come into the city, into DC. And then I think when the Iran deal passed too, it's like, well, we really have to reevaluate our strategy on how to be influential, because I mean, that was the number one policy priority for them. And obviously they were not able to stop that.
Right. Well, and that's kind of my problem when people say that APAC has this outsized influence in American politics. If they did, the Iran deal would be a non-starter. And the Iran deal obviously gave Iran a path towards a nuclear weapon, which is its stated goal is to end Israel and then come for the West. So yes, I would think it's just kind of obvious that not obvious to certain members of the Biden administration and the Obama administration, because they had a lot of the same staffers. That was APAC's, like you said, their number one goal. They couldn't achieve it. So obviously APAC is not this like huge boogeyman that gets everything they want and runs the US political system if they can't achieve their top policy position. And even, Trump repealed the Iran deal, and then Biden's administration started working on it again. So it's not like it was just a done deal either once that was taken away. With your personal...
I completely agree with that, where I think like a lot of people think, oh, this whether it's APAC, the NRA, AARP, any of these trade associations. Oh, they're so powerful, you can't get anything through. Massive donors, this guy controls everything. There are so many variables in the political system, with passing legislation, with getting elected, with staying at the forefront of stuff, that there's, one, like, money alone isn't going to solve it. It's going to take like money, talent, timing, and a lot of different people as well. Because it's one of these things too. Like, I'll speak to people about, at least the business of politics and being a political consultant. Like, I truly believe there's never going to be a Jeff Bezos of political consulting, where everyone's going to this guy to do everything for them. I mean, it's very fragmented. There's a lot of nuanced jobs to it. And like, I have yet to meet someone who can do absolutely everything. And even when you talk about like the big firms in the business, like, they could be involved in a lot of stuff, but eventually they turn in, I would say, from like a firm driven by like policy, beliefs, and everything, to just another advertising firm that ends up doing some political stuff. So like, but back to the point of like trade associations and APAC, I think they have influence. I mean, I think they can get in front of legislators, they can speak with them, they can make their case, but like, they really have had to reevaluate their strategy with the Iran deal passing. I think they had a lot of friendlies in the White House with Trump, especially in national security circles. But like, that's obviously not the case with Biden. And they're losing the PR battle in US media and world media when you speak about like the Israeli Hamas war going.
Right. Totally. Your personal experience with APAC. You went on an APAC trip, like you said. I went on one. It was bipartisan. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I think that's an interesting topic of conversation.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, my trip consisted of like campus leaders, so people who are young and involved in politics. I would say it was like 1/3 Republicans, 2/3 Democrats. I was also very involved in their like student activist movements, and they would have this conference called Saban, and I think I went to that 2 or 3 times. Their biggest thing, you could tell, is they're a very far-sighted organization. They're thinking about the future. How do they protect this issue? They know that their biggest threat is Israel becoming a one-party issue. So if only Republicans support them and Democrats don't like them. So they're thinking like, how do we keep this bipartisan? And their biggest threat is the progressive left. I mean, you would see APAC invest substantially more dollars, at least in their campus program, to recruiting like Democrats and leftists on campus to educate them on the issue and to try and make them pro-Israel. And I think with the people they did touch, they were successful. Like the trip to Israel, I mean, you got a good feel for the entire country, the political and economic struggles that these people deal with. I think all like the educational seminars they would have in the United States, like, those were always well run. You'd hear from experts. I remember they had like the guy who was in charge, the general in charge of like Israeli military intelligence, speak to us. And he showed up and had like a bodyguard on stage the entire time in a trench coat. And I thought that was like the coolest thing I've ever seen. But yeah, I think they know their biggest threat is the progressive left. And they were doing a lot of work to try and get those people on board. But like, you're never going to see a return till 20 years till these people actually start running for office, or they're like a key advisor to certain people. And I don't know. I don't think they're winning that fight. I truly think the progressive left has totally sided with Palestinians, with Hamas, and there's nothing wrong, I think, siding with Palestinians. But when I reference that, I do truly mean like Hamas saying, "Oh, these people, like, they have the right to self-determination." To what? Destroy all of Gaza? Like, no. To cause a humanitarian crisis and then go commit terrorism? Like, no, no way. So I just think it's like, but APAC has fallen short. They've not been able to educate the far left on that. I think like the wokeism stuff has taken over as well, where like, I think it was very smart that who's ever doing the PR propaganda for Hamas, for those people, like, they really painted everyone in Gaza as oppressed. And for the most part, I think the average person is very oppressed there. But it just so happens like they have a ruling government there that was elected that is absolutely just wreaking havoc in the region. And quite frankly, they would do it around the world if they had more resources.
Totally. Well, yeah, the one thing that I think these people don't understand is like they're just getting involved in the conflict now. And they see like, oh, oppressed people we perceive as white. We're going to choose oppressed. What they don't understand is the Palestinians have been losing this fight for about 75 years because they put all their faith in a governing body that puts all of their sights on total annihilation of Israel, which just isn't going to happen, rather than setting up a nice society for them there. And every 20 years, it just gets worse for them, with this self-determination attitude that they have. Because again, the self-determination really only has to do with annihilating Israel. They've not been able to win at that on a large scale. They never will be able to. So I wonder if the progressives in this country know that they're backing a losing side, or if they care. Sorry, sounds like they've already moved on to their next topic.
I don't think they care if they're backing winners or losers. I think they care about how they feel about who they're backing, and like the controversy of the day and the oppressed people of the day were the Hamas sympathizers, and that's why they're behind them. So that's my thoughts on why they got behind them and why it could be a very fleeting issue as well.
Yeah, totally. Well, so next election cycle, I guess a lot can happen between there, but do you think this will be a forefront of most voters' minds, or do you think other things will take over?
Yeah, I think this will be one of the three main topics. I mean, we're looking at the border, public education, Israel, maybe throw in inflation. I don't think inflation's going to be top issue anymore.
Oh, really?
But I truly think like when you look at those three issues, the border, education, foreign affairs, Israel, like that's what's going to dominate what's going on right now, because I think the conflict's only going to get worse. The madness you see in public education is here to stay, and there's no real easy solution to fix it. And then I think the border, like I saw a report, I think this was yesterday, there was almost 9,000 people apprehended at the border or in contact with Border Patrol agents. Imagine how many people got through and were not caught or were not contacted. And now I guess if you get caught, they just let you in anyways. So, I mean, I think those three things are going to dominate the election. And hopefully, if Donald Trump's the candidate, hopefully he can speak about that stuff in not too much of a bombastic way where he gets people's attention. But they're like, okay, yeah, this guy's realistic and he's not racist. But, if he shoots himself in the foot and Joe Biden goes to Wilmington, Delaware and spends 9 months in his basement, we could see a repeat. That'd be the worst thing.
Yeah, it's kind of sad how likely that is at this point. I guess any weird predictions? Do you think the Democrats are going to drop Biden?
I used to think the Democrats had a really strong chance of dropping Joe Biden. Excuse me, I put it at like 35% chance, but I don't think it's going to happen. Like realistically, to get someone else on the ballot, someone's name to appear on the ballot in other states, it would be such a heavy lift to happen so quickly. Like I think like anyone in politics, they obviously love the game, they love the scheming, they love the what ifs, the last minute surprises, but like this is not a student council election where someone can drop out one day and then a new kid enters stage right, and then they print the ballots the morning of and kids go vote. Like there's a lot of rules and laws with elections, and just the process of appearing on all the ballots in all these states. Like I don't see it happening. And I realistically think too, if a Michelle Obama, if an Oprah, if a Susan Rice, if a Gavin Newsom was trying to take over Joe Biden's role as the nominee, if they were trying to take over his role as a nominee, they would have some surrogates within the Democratic Party, like totally just trying to tarnish his name right now or calling into question. And there is no organized effort to do that.
Okay, awesome. Well, I think we got a lot of good stuff here. I hope this episode acts as a really good political. I hope for my audience listening, what this does is it helps you have a conversation not about like I want Trump to win or I want Biden to win, but like really looking at the landscape of like this is what Biden needs to do, this is what Trump needs to do, this is the issues that other people are seeing. So thank you again, Charlie. All of your stuff is going to be linked below.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on, and